a wedding reception, my husband, Jake, twirled Chloe as if she belonged to him. When a mutual acquaintance jokingly asked, "Doesn't your wife feel jealous?" Jake just smirked and responded, "My wife? Seriously, she's completely useless baggage, just a monotonous roommate with a wedding band." The whole table burst into laughter and Chloe even grinned. My emotions didn't flare up. Instead, my core chilled instantly. I didn't engage in a verbal fight. Rising from my seat, I removed my ring and quietly stated, "You just witnessed the last laugh you'll ever get at my expense." Then I walked away. Before I reveal the events that followed that night, tell me if you have ever felt marginalized within a relationship. Please hit like if you relate, as the consequences of my exit are astonishing. I am Ava, 32 years old. We had been married for 4 years and together for almost 7. And then there was Chloe. Chloe was Jake's alleged closest friend from their youth. I initially dismissed their closeness as innocent, often finding it amusing. I convinced myself it was sweet that he maintained a platonic friendship with a woman whom he treated like a sibling. This was his perpetual explanation. "She's practically kin." I desperately wished that assessment was true. I wished to believe many things. Initially, my marriage to Jake appeared stable externally. We owned a pleasant duplex in Willow Creek, maintained 2 vehicles, and held secure employment. Jake was employed in sales, a silver-tongued man consistently described as charismatic. I, conversely, am a graphic designer. Naturally reserved, I dedicate long hours to work, but prioritize tranquility within the home. Hypothetically, our lives were flawless. However, official records never reveal underlying tensions. They certainly don't document when you become emotionally erased within your own partnership. I recall precisely when I started noticing the change. It happened after the novelty of marriage diminished. Unexpectedly, Chloe ceased being merely Jake's old acquaintance. She became a permanent fixture, late-night communications, private jokes that excluded me. If I inquired about texts arriving at 1:00 a.m., he would casually wave it away. "It's only Chloe. She's struggling." Instantly, my concerns were invalidated. It was implied that I was being overly sensitive for disliking my husband's preoccupation with another woman's messaging late at night. I persistently attempted to remain an accommodating spouse. My goal was to be the relaxed, confident partner. I rationalized that if he intended to be unfaithful, he wouldn't be so transparent. Yet internally, the alteration was palpable. In nearly every anecdote Jake shared, Chloe's name was central. "Chloe mentioned this. Chloe advised that eatery. Chloe suggests we visit this spot." Gradually, I was demoted from being his equal partner. I was merely observing their shared performance. A profoundly painful incident occurred near our 3rd wedding anniversary. I dedicated several weeks to organizing a surprise trip, a quiet weekend retreat to a Sierra cabin. I reserved a snug location, ensuring every detail, including the wine and logs for the fireplace, was ready, remembering Jake's past fondness for solitude. I hoped this escape, filled with trekking, astronomy, and cooking together, would rekindle our early romance. When I presented the booking confirmation, his expression was void of emotion. He offered neither gratitude nor a smile. The following morning, he announced that Chloe had proposed a coastal getaway at a Laguna Beach resort, claiming it sounded significantly more enjoyable. He hadn't asked for my input or suggested a compromise. He had already canceled the cabin and finalized the resort reservation. In an instant, Chloe's judgment had nullified my carefully planned initiative, expense, and attentiveness. We proceeded to the resort, though I cannot honestly claim enjoyment. I spent the majority of the time observing Jake send texts and beach photos to Chloe. He even filmed us during dinner, making a facetious comment to her that read, "I really should have brought you along instead." He genuinely found this amusing. I forced a grin so tightly that my jaw muscles ached. That moment solidified an undeniable reality. I did not function as his proper spouse. I served as his foundation, his insurance policy, the person ensuring timely payments and a stocked household. Chloe, however, received his excitement, vigor, and complete focus. I refrained from lashing out. That is simply not my personality. I avoid yelling or physical displays of anger. I internalized the frustration. Nevertheless, I initiated a silent strategy. This was a separate kind of preparation because I realized that upon reaching my limit, I could not afford to be vulnerable. Gaining information became the primary goal. I contacted Sam, a family law attorney referred by my cousin. During a 90-minute meeting, I disclosed all the details. Sam clarified my legal entitlements, confirmed which assets were mine, and outlined self-protection steps. Crucially, the duplex had been purchased solely in my name, using my funds before my engagement to Jake. This fact served as my crucial safeguard. Sam instructed me to begin separating our financial assets slowly to avoid drawing attention. I proceeded to open a new account at a different banking institution, channeling the majority of my income there. I maintained a minimal balance in our joint account so Jake wouldn't notice any significant change. I wasn't running yet. I was constructing a viable escape route. While I executed this strategy, Chloe grew increasingly brazen. She would appear at our duplex unexpectedly, bringing homemade meals for Jake if I was occupied working late. She began tagging him in online posts that should have been addressed to me, sharing anniversary sentiments and overly sentimental soulmate memes. Jake would simply laugh, showing me, acting as if it were all in good fun. I would force a smile externally while internally deteriorating. One evening, I finally confronted Jake directly, asking, "Do you ever notice how much of our marriage Chloe occupies?" He immediately dismissed me, rolling his eyes, saying, "You're being delusional. Stop being so insecure. Chloe has always been here. If you can't cope with that, perhaps you are the issue." That evening marked the end of my hope that he would ever choose me over her. By the time the wedding, the event that marked the conclusion, arrived, my plan was fully developed. Although I didn't know the precise moment I would activate it, I was prepared. Therefore, when Jake glanced across the table, exchanged a laugh with Chloe, and publicly labeled me useless baggage, it was like a mechanism snapping into place. I felt no fury or sorrow, only absolute certainty. I realized the marriage was already finished. All that remained was execution. The anniversary journey was the definitive turning point. Jake, my husband at the time, seemed completely oblivious to the harm he inflicted, or perhaps he simply didn't care. I had invested weeks preparing a customized trip, a secluded Sierra cabin just for us, free from interference. I utilized funds from my separate account for the booking, packed board games we used to enjoy, and even pinpointed the hiking path where we once got lost and ended up playfully soaked in the rain. I genuinely believed it would help us recall the individuals we were before Chloe dominated our shared life. When I presented Jake with the cabin photos, his only reaction was a shrug. No smile, no thanks, just, "Looks kind of dull." The following day, he returned home beaming. He informed me that Chloe, his so-called best friend, had mentioned a luxurious coastal resort perfect for couples. He had already secured the booking. My stomach plummeted. This wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even open for discussion. Since it originated from Chloe, it was the non-negotiable decision. My effort, my genuine care, my voice, none of it mattered. I remember staring at him across the kitchen countertop, silently thinking, "Did you dedicate even 1 second to considering my feelings?" But I held my tongue. Arguing would only result in his standard counterattack, labeling me paranoid or excessively sensitive. I had memorized his manipulation tactics. I bit my lip, packed my swimwear, and went to a resort I never wanted. The entire trip was torment. Jake focused more on his phone than on me. He sent Chloe ocean snapshots, videos of the hotel lobby, and even a picture of me at dinner captioned, "Wish you were here." Chloe responded with heart and laughing emojis. He displayed this to me as if it were an inside joke I should find humorous, too. I forced a smile with clenched teeth, yet mentally, something within me shattered. It was then I understood I wasn't his companion. I was simply a stand-in, a prop, the theoretical wife. Chloe monopolized the excitement, the energy, and the validation. I didn't yell. I didn't initiate a scene. Instead, I made a commitment. I would stop begging for small tokens of respect and start preparing for my independence. That night, as Jake slept soundly beside me, I lay awake gazing at the ceiling, reviewing every possible scenario. If I departed, what were my requirements? Money, legal protection, a detailed strategy. That night, I decided to abandon naivety and embrace strategy. My initial action was self-protection. I arranged another consultation with Sam, the lawyer I had previously met. He provided clear instructions. Since the duplex was in my name and purchased pre-marriage, I held significant leverage. He recommended steadily diverting my income into my separate account and establishing an accurate record of all shared expenditures so Jake could not claim financial abandonment. I adhered to every instruction. Each day, I took minor steps. I channeled more funds into my personal savings. I created a secure, password-protected folder on my computer containing copies of all critical records, the property deed, banking statements, and my retirement records. I purchased moving containers and concealed them behind gardening equipment in the garage. Jake remained oblivious. He never paid attention to matters that didn't directly concern him. The irony was that Jake mistook my quiet nature for weakness, believing my silence indicated passivity. But my silence afforded me the necessary space for preparation. When he ridiculed me publicly, I didn't retaliate. When Chloe's name permeated our discussions, I didn't object. On the surface, I maintained the facade of the docile, uninteresting wife. Internally, I was diligently building my exit, brick by painful brick. The breaking point wasn't solely about Chloe or the resort. It stemmed from Jake repeatedly demonstrating that my participation in his life was disposable. He desired the stability of a wife, but refused to grant the respect due to a partner. That realization solidified my resolve. I'll never forget one trivial moment that sealed the deal. After we returned from the resort, sitting in the living room, I asked Jake if we could spend one weekend without Chloe, just the two of us. He laughed, not warmly, but in his usual dismissive way, and said, "You're hypersensitive. Chloe isn't going anywhere. If you can't accept that, maybe you aren't right for me." I simply nodded. I neither argued nor cried. But internally I concluded, "You are correct. I am not suited to a man who views me as a fallback." That was the day I internally divorced him. The official documentation would follow, but emotionally I was free. I was merely awaiting the perfect opportunity, the irrefutable evidence, the final outrage to initiate the plan. And that moment arrived at the wedding. The evening he danced with Chloe, entirely neglected me, and announced to complete strangers that I was useless baggage. That was more than just an insult. It was his confession. He believed I was insignificant. He believed I lacked any power. However, by that time, I had successfully put everything in place. My financial security, my lawyer, my comprehensive plan. So when Jake smirked at that table and destroyed our marriage with a laugh, I didn't need to protest. I didn't need to fight. I merely needed to exit and finally implement the silent strategy I had been crafting for nearly 12 months. When Jake humiliated me at the wedding, the feeling I experienced wasn't that of utter collapse. It was a profound sense of clarity. He believed his commentary diminished me, yet in reality, he gave me complete justification to depart without any residual doubt. The instant I stepped out of that ballroom, I was no longer directed by heartache. I was guided by systematic procedure. I ascended to the hotel's suite, moving soundlessly. Jake was still celebrating downstairs, enjoying the attention and twirling Chloe. I didn't stop at the minibar or sit down. I immediately went to the dresser, slipped off my wedding ring and placed it on the surface, treating it like a temporary piece of costume jewelry whose use had expired. For a moment, I simply examined it. My chest felt surprisingly light, not weighted down. That delicate gold circle had symbolized the heaviest constraint I had ever borne, and removing it felt like finally drawing a clean breath. Then I began packing. My movements were calm and purposeful, not hurried or frantic. My evening dress folded, my makeup bag zipped, shoes tucked into the side compartment. Each item settled into the suitcase as if I had practiced the routine. In a sense, I had. I visualized this precise moment so often that when it finally occurred, my body acted autonomously. I wheeled the suitcase to the door, took one last glance around the room, and left. At the the lobby desk, I checked out discreetly. The clerk asked if my stay was enjoyable. I smiled politely and confirmed it was exactly what I required. Then, I entered my vehicle and drove back to Willow Creek in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the drone of the motor and the steady beat of my heart. For 40 minutes, I experienced a sensation I hadn't felt in years: peace. Upon reaching the duplex, my duplex, I switched into full execution mode. The first operation, securing the property. The smart home control panel in the kitchen was my first destination. Jake maintained his own access profile, which included codes and biometric data. 2 quick clicks and his access was fully erased. His key fob was rendered useless. His profile was deleted. I then proceeded to the garage and manually changed the entry sequence. 5 minutes later, Jake was barred from entering my home, and he remained totally unaware. The second operation, cutting off the finances. Jake had always exploited our shared bank account as his personal spending reserve. Expensive meals, unnecessary gifts for Chloe, new technology he never consulted me about. He operated under the assumption that the supply was infinite. It was not. That evening, I logged in and moved the remaining funds into my private account. Next, I froze the credit card he carried, the supplementary card I had provided him. A few rapid clicks, and it was useless. If he tried purchasing a drink that night, it would be rejected. The third operation, removing his possessions. This stage was the most demanding, not due to emotional pain, but simply because of the labor involved. Remember the moving containers I had hidden in the garage? I brought them inside, assembled them, and commenced boxing up his life. Every dress shirt, every pair of shoes, every razor on his side of the vanity. I felt neither resentment nor sorrow. I was completely detached, like a property manager clearing out a tenant who defaulted on rent. Box after box, meticulously labeled, were stacked in the garage. By the time the sun began to rise, 42 taped boxes contained every vestige of Jake. My house finally regained its appearance, clean and quiet. Around 3:00 a.m., I sent a 2-word message to my lawyer, Sam. Plan executed. I then closed my laptop, climbed into bed, and slept more deeply than I had in years. The following morning, my phone continuously flashed with notifications. First, a casual message from Jake. You left early. Figured you were tired. See you at home. I disregarded it. An hour later, a second text arrived. My card isn't working. Did you forget to pay the bill? I smiled and flipped my phone over. Then came the telephone call, loud and frantic. Ava, I'm locked out. My key fob won't work. The code is disabled. What in the hell is happening? I chose to answer that call. I know, I stated plainly. What do you mean, you know? This isn't humorous. Let me in. His voice was high-pitched, like a distressed teenager's. No, I replied, my voice hard as marble. What do you mean, no? Ava, stop this nonsense. Open the damn door. I could hear Chloe's voice in the background, sharp and confused. She can't actually do that. She wouldn't. That nearly made me laugh. They were convinced I lacked the capacity. They thought my quiet demeanor meant weakness. I heard you, Jake, I said. I heard precisely what you said last night about me being useless baggage and boring. So consider this me adding some excitement to your life. You are now free. No boring wife. No boring house. Just you and Chloe, exactly what you desired. He stammered, attempting denials, pleading. He insisted it was a simple joke. He swore I was overreacting. He claimed I was ruining everything over nothing. I remained unmoved. All of your belongings are packaged in 42 boxes currently in the garage, I informed him. A moving service will collect them tomorrow morning and transport them to a storage facility. It's paid for 3 months. I will text you the address. After that period, it becomes your responsibility. The joint account is closed. The credit card is canceled. The divorce filings will be delivered on Monday. You are prohibited from doing this, he snapped. I already have, I countered. I then terminated the call and immediately blocked his number. Phase 1 was an unqualified success. The 10-second video clip achieved what prolonged disputes could never accomplish. It instantly silenced the counter-narrative. It required no surrounding details or spin. It consisted purely of Jake's distinct words, unequivocally dismantling his marriage in front of an audience of strangers. The genius of it was that I didn't need mass distribution. I only sent it to a sufficient number of people, and the resulting echo handled the remainder. The first person to call was the bride. She was incandescent, not with me, but with Jake and Chloe. "That was my ceremony," she fumed. "They utilized my reception to make light of marriage and publicly humiliate you in front of my relatives. Ava, I truly apologize." Her voice cracked as she spoke the word. I realized the extensive collateral damage Jake and Chloe had inflicted. They hadn't just harmed me, they had transformed someone else's important occasion into their personal stage. Next came Jake's parents. During her initial call, his mother had berated me and pleaded with me to reconcile. This time, she was noticeably different, shaken and deeply embarrassed. "We were unaware, Ava. We truly didn't know he would speak in such a manner." Her voice was soft, as if she struggled to accept the evidence against her favored son. She initially attempted a defense. Perhaps he was intoxicated, perhaps it was jest, but her excuses sounded hollow even to her own ears. She saw the evidence and could not deny it. Then there was Chloe's partner, Owen. His message was brief and decisive. "Thank you for sharing this. She is no longer part of my life." Within hours, I saw that he had posted the clip publicly on social media, tagging both Chloe and Jake, accompanied by a scathing account of years of deceit, disrespect, and betrayal. This generated the massive spread. Once Owen made it public, it propagated rapidly. Mutual acquaintances saw it, shared it, and commented extensively. The sympathy Jake and Chloe had been attempting to cultivate vanished overnight. Their carefully constructed narrative, that I was merely a hysterical, insecure wife who couldn't handle his female best friend, collapsed entirely under the weight of Jake's own recorded voice. Definitive confrontation didn't require us to meet face to face. Every incoming call and text was, in essence, the world finally validating what I had silently endured for years. "You are not the victim, you are the source of the problem." Jake certainly tried to fight back. He left me voice messages oscillating between intense anger and profound desperation. One moment he was enraged. "You destroyed me, Ava, over one ridiculous remark." The next he was begging, "Please, let's just talk. We can fix this situation." I never responded. Not once. My silence was my greatest asset, and I refused to relinquish it. The most significant consequence came from unexpected sources. Jake's supervisor contacted me, not to pry, but to confirm he had seen the viral video. Jake's profession was sales, a field built entirely on credibility and reputation. No one wants to hire or buy from a man publicly shown humiliating his wife at a formal event. By the end of that week, I learned through contacts that Jake had been terminated. They used polite terminology, but I understood the reality. His career, like his marriage, crumbled due to a single video clip. Chloe's outcome was no better. Owen's public termination of their relationship obliterated her social standing. Friends who had previously supported her pulled away. Her family retracted support, ashamed by her behavior. Her parents, who had always tolerated her special relationship with Jake, could not overlook the humiliation of seeing their daughter smirking in that recording while another woman was being disparaged. She lost her emotional safety net just as Jake lost his professional one. The actual, final showdown was simply observing the two of them standing amidst the rubble created by their own decisions. They had laughed at me together, confident in my powerlessness. Now, they were the joke. The consequence extended further than I had anticipated. Former college associates, women I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out, telling me they had seen the video and expressing pride in my decisive exit. One wrote, "Your final silence when you just left was louder than anything you could have articulated." I hadn't intended it that way, but she was right. Sometimes, a quiet departure creates the loudest impact. Most importantly, I didn't need to discredit Jake or Chloe with my own accusations. I never needed to scream. I was right all along. All I had to do was hold up a mirror. When everyone saw the reflection, the cruelty, the hubris, the self-entitlement, it became an inescapable truth. That was the echo. It wasn't just the video clip replaying. It was the ensuing silence. The silence where Jake no longer had defenders. The silence where Chloe's name disappeared from conversations. The silence where I could finally breathe without constantly performing a supporting role in someone else's drama. For years, I had been an invisible fixture in my marriage. For years, Chloe was the focus, Jake was the star, and I was merely the backdrop. Ultimately, my calm, deliberate actions illuminated them, not me. Once the truth was exposed, they had nowhere to hide. That is the nature of echoes. They persist long after the initial sound fades, reverberating until the message cannot be denied. Jake's words, useless baggage, boring roommate with a ring, were meant to belittle me. Instead, they followed him everywhere. And every time they echoed, the world saw him for exactly who he was. 6 months. That was the duration required for the documents to be signed, the ink to dry, and the word divorced to officially replace married beside my name. In the broader scope of time, 6 months is brief, but for me, it felt like an entire era condensed into half a year. Sam, my lawyer, commented several times that my case was one of the least complicated he had managed recently. He stated, "When video evidence exists of a husband publicly disavowing his marriage, judges rarely tolerate delays." Jake attempted bluster initially, issuing empty demands and trying to maintain some illusion of control, but the video continually overshadowed him. There was nothing to contest. The duplex was rightfully mine. The assets I had secured were untouched. In the end, he signed, utterly defeated, because the facts left him no room for leverage. The consequences for Jake extended beyond the divorce decree. His sales career was lost. The very charm he used to secure clients turned into the arrogance that destroyed his standing. No one trusts their finances to a man whose marriage collapsed on a viral video. A few acquaintances mentioned seeing him working as a bartender at a local establishment in Metro Center, struggling financially. When I visualized Jake, who once paraded around in custom suits and gleaming shoes, now cleaning sticky surfaces for tips, I felt no satisfaction. I felt no pity either. I only felt detachment, like observing a stranger whose choices had finally caught up to him. Chloe fared equally poorly. After Owen, the partner she had misled for years, posted that footage, her social life imploded. Her friends distanced themselves. Her family retracted support, ashamed by her behavior. From what I've been told, she now occupies a small rental unit with younger roommates, barely subsisting on temporary work. The woman who once craved attention is now the subject of whispers. Every whisper begins the same way. Did you see that clip? But the most important aspect for me was this. I didn't have to lift a finger after that initial night. I didn't defame them, didn't spread gossip, and didn't fuel the fire. I simply withdrew myself, presented the undeniable truth, and allowed their own words to inflict the harm. They essentially destroyed themselves. I simply stopped standing with them in the wreckage. My life now is quieter and fundamentally changed. I sold the duplex. Too many memories lingered within those walls. His laughter in the kitchen, Chloe's footwear discarded in the hallway during her unexpected visits, the phantom sounds of my own silence when I should have spoken up. I refused to live among phantoms, so I sold it and purchased a modern condo downtown. It's smaller, but it is exclusively mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offer a view of the city. Every morning I drink coffee bathed in sunlight. There are no jests at my expense, no phones vibrating with Chloe's name, just serenity. I have filled the space with greenery. It may sound trivial, but tending to something, watching it flourish because I provide care, light, and water, feels therapeutic. I even resumed painting, an activity I abandoned after college. The canvases lean against my walls, splashes of color reminding me that my identity is more than being a wife, a source of stability, or a background figure. Occasionally, people ask if I regret not shouting at him that night, not throwing a drink in his face, or not calling Chloe every possible name. But this is the truth. My silence was more powerful than any outburst. Leaving without a single word inflicted a wound he will never forget. Because when I ceased reacting, when I stopped accepting the role he assigned me, he lost his audience. Do I still occasionally recall his words? Yes. Useless baggage, boring roommate with a ring. They linger, but they no longer hurt. Now they serve as a reminder of how far I have progressed. If being boring means maintaining a tranquil home, financial stability, and self-respect, then I embrace the label. I choose that label over chaos any day. Regarding Jake and Chloe, I don't monitor them. I don't check their profiles. I am indifferent to their current location. If I hear about them, it's through unsolicited whispers. And every whisper confirms the same thing, the universe affirming my correct decision. The best form of vindication was not boxing his belongings or freezing his assets. It wasn't even the video evidence. The best revenge was living in a space defined by me on my own terms. Living without anticipating a man's attention or fearing another woman's presence. Living in peace. 6 months ago, I walked out of that wedding, and everyone assumed I was the one being left behind. The truth is, I was the one moving forward. Jake woke up the next morning in a rented hotel room, expecting me to be there. But he had been alone long before my exit. I simply formalized the reality. If you have ever been disregarded or disrespected by someone who should have cherished you most, you understand the depth of that pain. My account is not just about betrayal. It is about discovering strength in silence and leaving with integrity. I welcome your own stories. Share them in the comments because your experience matters here. And if you believe that truth resonates louder than vengeance, hit like, subscribe, and join me for more stories that remind us we are never as helpless as they desire us to be.